Welcome to episode 202 of Girl Take the Lead, where each week we explore womanhood and leadership. And I'm your host, Yo Kenny. Tammy Alverez, Gen X, joins me today to discuss her new book, Escaping the Career Trap: Transform Your Apathy, a self leadership blueprint for high achievers who want to experience true career fulfillment. Tammy is the CEO of the Career Winner Circle, author, professional keynote speaker, inspirational coach, and former corporate executive. Her spirited, break all the rules approach blends C suite experience with a pragmatic, results based coaching style that helps business professionals create a big impact and love every Monday again. Tammy's book is written for people who feel disenfranchised. And the so what is that you start to become the CEO of You Inc., and then everything changes. Some of the topics we covered were career trap examination, research findings around apathy, how to transform apathy or just good enough, being the CEO of your career and life, beyond personal branding, aligning companies and personal employee ambitions, personal exploration of our passion, and skills we need to build resilience by failing successfully. Enjoy the listen. And here you go. Well, Tammy, welcome to Girl Take the Lead. I think we're going to have a great conversation. So thank you for joining us.
And thank you, Yolanda, for the invite. I've been so excited to do this recording with you. So I'm glad we're finally here.
Yeah. And why don't you introduce yourself first to our listeners and our viewers? That would be helpful.
Absolutely. So I'm Tammy Alverez, and I'm the founder of the Career Winner Circle, where we empower business leaders to make a big impact and love every Monday again. And and we're recording on a Monday. So hopefully you woke up really excited about your day today. And I spent much of my corporate career in and around Wall Street. And when I ended, I was, a C-level managing director, leading over 3,000 people in 35 countries. And I loved my job until I didn't. And I remember not loving it anymore. And so I ultimately made a big decision. So I cashed out of Wall Street about 7 years ago. I moved to a tropical island off the coast of Belize in Central America.
Hey,
Started.
sounds like perfect.
I mean, it's just absolutely all the things. And so now today we work with businesses and individuals to really help solve the problem of like, I hate my job. Everything is just good enough. We've got this apathetic haze that's kind of hanging out in corporate America. And so that's what we are here to do, is to eradicate that apathetic haze on an individual and an organizational level. And it's just so much fun leaning into that kind of purpose-filled work.
Well, tell us about your book, because your book has an incredible title, which
Thank you.
I'll go for.
Subtlety has never been my strength, Yolanda, right? So, the subtlety of a sledgehammer half the time. But the book is called Escaping the Career Trap: Transform Your Apathy into Ambition and Never Hate Mondays Again. It's got gorgeous golden handcuffs on the front, which I think a lot of us who have been in that situation can relate to. And I'm super excited to announce, literally yesterday, I found out that the book took 3 first place awards in the Book Fest competition for this year. So I'm really excited about that in terms of work culture, professional development, and career. So it's nice to get that acknowledgement, given it's my first book and maybe my only, given how hard it was to write. But yeah, it's a journey. It's a guided journey to really find that elusive career fulfillment. And it's really designed to be that step by step, do this first, second, third, based a lot on our coaching practices in terms of helping mid to senior level leaders pivot, and then moving into some of that leadership and some of that business stuff in terms of being able to pay it forward and truly thrive. And the emails that I get and just random strangers saying, I read this, it's made such a big impact on me, was really, really exciting. So
I don't think you explained, though, the title.
Okay.
Like how you got to the title.
Like, how did I get to that title? It was interesting because where all my best ideas come from is usually with a martini in my hand, right? So we were at the time we had moved to Mexico City. So we moved to Mexico City about a year ago after living in Belize for 5 years. And we moved into a new building. So we had a happy hour just to meet our neighbors and that kind of thing. And we were all talking about what we do for a living. And I was just trying to explain the problem we solved, of course, after a few martinis. And I'm like, it's like the escape room where you have all these, riddles and you just, you're trying to solve the code, but you can't get out of the room in time. And so that's kind of where the career trap came from is, just kind of sharing those journeys and how frustrating it feels for that to happen. Because I think a lot of us feel stuck.
Mhm.
And a lot of us, we know we're good at what we do. We certainly know what we don't like to do, but we don't know what we do want to do.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and that feeling of being in your mid 40s and committing so much to what, one track, if you will, in your career, and then realizing that, all right, this is not gonna play for much longer, but then having no idea what to do next is
Mhm.
really frustrating. And so a lot of us do feel trapped. And so we can break that cycle and do
I
better for
love it.
ourselves and for those that we love.
I love it. And I know you've got apathy in there. Transform your apathy to ambition. So, how does apathy, that was I started to think about that a little bit. Like, okay, so apathy is basically not caring, right?
Yeah.
So, is it like you don't care anymore whether you go to work or not, or you don't care about what do you see there?
Yeah, so I'll share with you some of what the research shows and then what I'm seeing and what I felt. Right?
Mhm.
Because you always, you coach and serve those who were like you, I think, and that's where the most effective coaching comes in. So Gartner did two different research studies, and they were both for global knowledge workers. And so the one study asked global knowledge workers, how satisfied are you with your job? And that number came back at 80%,
Mhm.
which is a high number. I was like really surprised to see that. But then they asked another question in terms of basically how much do you care about what you do?
Mhm.
And that's the number that went down to 20%.
Wow.
So we've got 60% of our population that is walking around in this apathetic haze. And I remember sitting in Chicago this winter January, I was getting ready to kick off a 3-day strategy session with one of my clients. And I was there early, and it was a big building, like full of all kinds of companies. So I grabbed a cup of coffee and I sat in the lobby and I just watched. Because again, I'm in Mexico City. I hang out in my office all the time. So I don't get to see the daily grind very often. And I just started watching and I was like, it looked like the zombie apocalypse had
Mhm.
invaded Chicago. People were shuffling in. They were looking at their feet. No one was making eye contact. No one was smiling. And I was like, what has happened?
Mhm.
And so from a business perspective, having employees, that are checked out can be devastating.
Mhm.
And from an individual perspective, being checked out has so many negative implications in terms of your personal quality of life, your long term earning potential. And so there's all of these reasons to fix it.
Mhm.
And what I've always been really curious about is like, okay, you've got two groups that have a very symbiotic relationship, employer and employee. Employers don't want zombies, and
Mhm.
employees don't want to feel like zombies. So if two groups that want the same thing, but they keep getting further and further apart. And it's like, why is that? Because you hear about all the employee satisfaction and pulse surveys and engagement and all these things, yet nothing is working, right?
Mhm.
Let's be honest, like all the things we're throwing at this, nothing seems to be working. And so we're missing a very, very key element here. And this is from an individual as well from a business perspective. And what I strongly believe is that when you connect your personal ambition and your personal aspirations to the company's biggest goals, you're going to start to see a difference. So,
Mhm.
what are the things that you get out of bed for in the morning, no matter what you do for a living?
Mhm.
What are those things you can do for 12 hours a day and end the day more energized than when you started it?
Mhm.
And when you can tap into that and put that to use on a more regular basis, individuals are more fulfilled and companies start to thrive.
Mm.
And so this apathetic haze is really, it's crushing individual careers, and livelihoods and lifestyles, as well as killing business performance.
So is that what when you say we get kind of stuck and we don't want to wake up on Monday morning? Is that is that the apathetic part
It
of
is,
us or
right? It's just good enough,
the
right? You feel like
resignation?
you're on this hamster wheel. You get that pit in your stomach on Sunday night because you know what's coming on Monday. And you're like, I
Mhm.
don't want to suffer these fools another minute, right? It's like, I can't do this, but it doesn't hurt enough to make a change because change is hard and scary. And, we can go down all that, that rabbit hole if you'd like to. But I think so many people stay stuck in that good enough phase until it's forced on you to not be good enough. Right? Because change will happen, whether you drive it or whether someone else is driving it. Things are always changing. I mean, we are in probably one of the most dynamic cycles, of career and business that I've ever seen.
Mhm.
And the hits just keep on coming, right? In terms of all the disruption. And so you can either be you can control that, or someone else can control it for you. And it's that apathy that just people stay stuck in until it's too late.
So when you talk about taking control, how does one empower themselves in order to let that go
Right.
and
Because
move
it feels
into
selfish
ambition?
sometimes, right? It's like, I
Mhm.
can't control anything. I don't control the hiring, the firing, who gets ripped, who doesn't. But
Right.
here's how you take control. And the one thing that really surprised me about the book, and I'll walk in but for just a second, is that this book is written for the disenfranchised worker. Let's not kid ourselves, right? If you hate Mondays, you need to read the book.
Mhm.
And the thing I never expected was that companies are paying me to come deliver this message to their organizations. I was like, you do realize that the first two chapters I talk about how messed up absolutely everything is, and that's kind of all your fault, right? I'm like, you do get that. And because the message in the book, the so what to this is that as an individual basis, if you start to treat your career like a business
Mhm.
and you become the CEO of You Inc.,
Mhm.
everything changes, Yolanda. It's amazing.
I know.
And
I've started thinking of myself that way.
oh, good.
Like, I'll think, oh, well, you should be editing right now or, posting, right? And I'll go, wait a minute. Hey,
Mm,
I'm the CEO here and I get to decide.
yes.
What a different mood people would be in if they had that point of view going into work every
Oh my
day.
goodness. Absolutely. And when you think about it, we already have the skills that we need.
Mm-hmm.
You know how to drive strategy. You know how businesses run. You know how to make sure you've got a good sales force and a good marketing team, and that your products and services are good, and that your pricing is right, and that your customers are satisfied. If you take these things that you do every day without thinking
Mm-hmm.
and apply them to you and your business, which is You Inc., then you show up differently.
Yeah. Is that
You
kind of like, sorry, is that
that
kind of like personal branding? Do you see personal
goes
branding the same way?
way beyond personal branding. That is absolutely a
Okay.
part of it, right? But it goes way beyond that. So, for example, we don't think of our power base, our network, as our sales team, but we need to, right? When, a business without a sales team is dead, right? No,
Right.
no new customers. And so, who in your organization and in your industry are saying amazing things about you when you're not in the room?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Who's out there being your champion and
No,
saying, "Oh
that's
my goodness,
true.
we've got to get Yolanda at the table because she's the only one who can do this for us." And
Right.
that's part of it. How often do we do a business strategy when we're trying to get funding or anything like that? It's like, okay, here's what it's going to look like the next 2 years when we're done. But do we do that for us? Not really. And
Yeah.
when we think about marketing, there's your personal branding, right? When we think
Mhm.
about customer service, what if we treated our work frenemies, those ones that just make our lives miserable at every chance we get? And what if we treated those coworkers as our most valuable customer? Like, how would that change our interaction, our outlook, and ultimately the impact that we're driving for the organization? Right? You
Mhm.
also don't make these decisions, which some people believe you don't have a choice. How many times do you see in corporate where someone has the honor of getting more work because they're really good at what they do, but they get no compensation change and they get no title change? I'm like, so let me get this right. As a business, if I'm working with a company and they're like, listen, we need you to do more work. I'm like, excellent. Let's renegotiate that statement of work. Happy to
Mhm.
do it. But we don't do that, right? We say yes and hope that somebody's going to recognize it, or how many times we say, just do this and I'll make it up to you on bonus season,
Yeah.
hoping the person doesn't get fired or develop amnesia by then. Now, if a client said to me, I need you to do work right now, but I might probably be able to pay you in about 8 months, I'd be like, hard pass on that, but thank you for the offer.
Mhm.
And there's ways to do this within an organization to where you are actually seen as a stronger leader because you say yes and
Mhm.
say no, but you say yes and let's negotiate this today, right? For this. And there's ways to do that. And so when you start to show up and treat your career like a business and you start to look at what you do and the impact, then you're not going to sit on your hands when a dumb idea comes across the table. Right?
Mhm.
You're going to be like,
Mhm.
oh no, this makes no sense. Let's find a different way. Or you're going to be the first one to say, listen, I'm seeing some trends from a customer perspective. We're getting the same kind of feedback, good or bad, new products or things you need to fix. Instead of just saying, it's not my job,
Right.
right? I'm just going to keep on moving on. And so you feel more engaged. You're doing the things that you love and the business is thriving at the same time. And so that whole CEO of your career piece of things makes all the difference in the world for individuals and for businesses.
Is it a shift for leadership to hear managers speak in this way? I mean, do you almost have to change the culture for the entire organization? And is that who you tend to work with?
I think that the idea of culture change is enough to make grown men cry, right? It's like millions of dollars, years and years and years, right? And like nothing to show for it, which is really kind of what it's been. And so it's less about the culture as an organization and
Mhm.
more about tapping into those individual aspirations and then using those for the collective good. And that's what we're showing organizations to do. We've got a business to business offer called Amplify 360, and it's designed to really eradicate this apathetic haze so that companies are seeing increases in revenue, profitability, quality, productivity, customer satisfaction, and retention. But
Mhm.
here's what we do. It's really interesting. We take a three-pronged approach because it's a multi-pronged problem, but we do it quick. We're in and out in like 3 months. And so we work with the individuals to teach them how to become the CEO of their career. Then we work with the leaders to teach them how to not screw this up.
Right.
And then we work with the
I
executive
get that.
team and the board to
Mhm.
say, what are your policies? What are you measuring? What does good look like? Let's make sure we're taking the organization in the right direction of travel.
Mhm.
Right? Some basic things like how many times you see you've got to stay enrolled for 2 years before you can take a new job. Well, that's a great way to send your best people to your competition,
Mhm.
right? Or you're going to promote you, but we can only give you 20% more, even though it would cost me 45% more to hire somebody from the outside. Like, on what planet does any of these things make sense? And there's a million other rabbit holes that we go into with the board and with the executive team in terms of what you measure. And I think one of the most interesting stories that highlights the impact of ambition, right, and aspiration is I was leading a global team. It was a big team, but we had like I 10 managers and they all did the exact same function for different parts of the business and different parts of the world. And my team was miserable. I mean, I could not get them to get excited about anything. And no matter what I tried, like it was just a train wreck. And I was like, all right, something's got to change here. So I just spitballed it. I'm like, okay, design your perfect job for me. What would it look like? And because clearly you guys are like not at all loving what we're doing, but it was super important. And these were really good and talented people. And it turned out like each of these groups did 5 or 6 things. Like they drove strategy, they onboarded customers, they did all the data, they did all these different things in a silo, right, for their groups. But as it turns out, one of my leaders just ate strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He loved it.
Mhm.
He hated data and really didn't care about the customers. I hate to say it, but he just didn't, he was not definitely a client facing person, but he was strategy. Another one just ate data, loved it. Like, give me more, give me more. And so what we ended up doing is reorging the team to where the one person led strategy for everyone.
Uh-huh.
Another person led data for everyone, and another one for customers, another one for onboarding, and so on. And we moved the teams underneath them based on the things that they loved.
Yeah.
Now, I
That
didn't have
sounds
to change.
terrific. That really does.
It was
That sounds
amazing.
like a nice solution
It
to,
required no HR involvement, which was important because that would have slowed me down. No reorg changes in terms of levels or titles or any of that stuff. And
yeah.
I did not have to redo our processes because they were all doing the things that they loved. They worked the handoffs off. They worked off the handoffs together in a seamless way, and things just fixed themselves quite literally. And
Well,
then all
I,
of a sudden the team is thriving.
well, I also think sometimes our talents and our skills kind of rise to the surface and you can't help but not do it. Like one thing that was a thread through my career was, put me into a creative role, a way that I just have to brainstorm or look at problem solving or put me in charge of a team that we've never done it before. That kind of thing was like you got the best of me when that happened. And you got the worst of me when you put me into something that was mediocre and it was routine and it was the same thing over and over again. And I've often thought that, people go into jobs thinking of the title and
Mm.
not so much of the skill or the talent that's involved with that job. And it's hard to interview for that because people are tied to, well, I'm going to be doing this and this and this and this, as opposed to, is that maximizing the best of me? I imagine you must see that a fair amount in your
All the
work.
time, right?
Yeah.
And I think a big part of making sure that you're running the right race is to check in as to why you're doing that. I got so many people that come through. It's like, I want to be a this, I want to be a C-suite, I want to be this. And I ask a very simple question. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Like most of the time, those jobs are not fun. So why
Oh,
do you want
yeah.
that? Well, it's
Yeah.
because I'm supposed to. It's the next thing. I want the Range Rover like my neighbors have, like all of these things that kind of fall hollow. And it's like, well, what if, you could have your cake and eat it too?
Hmm.
Like, what if you didn't have to sell out to really get everything that you wanted? And so let's get really clear on that why and why it's important to you, because there's nothing worse than killing yourself working and you finally get there and then you look around and you're like, is this all there is?
Yeah.
It's like I busted my stuff for what? Like, for this. And that's how you know you're running the wrong race.
Yeah.
And so finding places where you can play to your strengths is so important.
What do you think of when I hear sometimes from millennials like we should know our purpose? Like,
Yeah,
finding
and I
our
do have one. I made one, right? So I know the millennial site, guilty. I got one too. And I know you've got one of each, right? So
Mhm.
in terms of that, and here's where I always find, like, here's how I look at purpose, and I always have. And so I'm in financial services. I was a Wall Street executive, right? I mean, that's not sexy. I mean, it looks like on TV and stock markets and all that kind of fun stuff, but the day-to-day work is not exciting in many cases. And so I always like, and I never really felt like this massive purpose for myself. Like there are
Mhm.
people out there that are compelled to save the world, and I am so thankful for them. I'm just not one of them, right?
Mhm.
And so I was like, what do I do? Like, how do I really line up and get excited? And for me, I found at least one of three things had to be present. So I needed to either be passionate about the work. Like, is the impact that we're making significant enough? Does it make a big deal?
Mhm.
If the work was not good enough, then I need to be passionate about my people. And do I
Mhm.
love the people that I'm working with? And do I love the team and all that kind of fun stuff?
Mhm.
And if that didn't exist, then the last thing was I need to be passionate about my growth.
Mhm.
And if I wasn't personally growing and developing and all that kind of fun stuff, then it was time to pull the cord and do
Yeah.
something very, very different.
Yeah. And I think, well, what you're describing too is going through the personal exploration and doing the work to find out what it is for you. Because I can remember, I don't know where I got this comparison, but you could be a barista and show up and say, well, I make coffee. Or you can be the barista who shows up and says, I make everybody smile first thing in the morning by giving them their coffee.
Yeah.
And such a difference in what you're doing and the purpose of it. But I do think you have to kind of be through that apathetic haze so that you're not in that deep resignation and you can see some optimism, some ambition for yourself. But I got to think with the mass exodus we've seen of women at the sea level and not even getting in there, that there's a point where you just go, yeah, it's just not worth it.
And in many cases, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, we're supposed to do this and we're supposed to want this. And, I think COVID was a good reset for a lot of us in terms of recalibrating
Yeah.
on where we really find our joy and where we find our purpose and our meaning in terms of our sense of self. And there's so many options out there
Mm-hmm.
that, playing the corporate game and, just taking that one rung after the next, oftentimes is not the right answer for men or women.
Mm-hmm.
And I think companies who understand that and organizations who create a more adaptive environment will have the best talent and thrive. And so I
Mm-hmm.
see a lot of people moving into middle market sectors. I see
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people saying, I'm not doing this whole big thing anymore. I'm done with politics, with the silliness, with all that stuff. And I'm going to take my skills that I've learned and be able to play bigger and have a bigger impact at a medium-sized organization.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of my biggest aha moments. I had moved from big banks to a medium-sized bank, and I was able to create a 3-year strategy and actually deliver it. I was like, wow, this is nice. There's like 700 reorgs and all these different strategy changes and everything else that's going on. Or, investors in the stock market saying, oh, this is a terrible idea. We're taking all your money back.
Yeah.
And so, so being clear on the why.
Yeah.
And then the other thing we talk about a lot is, obviously playing to your strengths and finding the things that light you up. But when you're able to do that and find an environment where that is in high demand and in short supply, now you're having fun
Mm-hmm.
because the things that you've worked so hard to craft and the things that come naturally for you are the things that are most needed.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've got tons of one of my clients, Phil, is a great example. He was career financial services and he was bored and he was starting to get sidelined, right? You age out after a while. And he was starting to get sidelined. Non-financial services, it's very common to reduce your staff by 10 to 15% every year. It just is how
Mm-hmm.
it's done. And, from that perspective, like you still have to innovate. You still have to keep your employees motivated. You still have to create new things and serve your customers and do all this. He didn't even know that was a skill.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here comes a very, very well-known startup that everyone knows and uses today. But when they were young, right, it was a land of milk and honey. Every time there was a problem, here's more money. Every time
Mm-hmm.
there, here's more tech, here's more tools, here's more money. And then here so it's the land of always you have more. And these young men who started this organization, they grew up in this company. And so now they go public, their competition gets their act together and they're getting their clocks cleaned. And the market is not happy. And the board is not happy. But yet, despite how smart these men are, they do not know how to do more with less because they've never had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So now Phil comes in knowing nothing about this industry whatsoever, but because doing more with less is in his DNA, and he takes a service-based mindset to show other people how to do it too, now he's an MVP.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's sitting at the cool kids table every day. He's on all the strategic conversations and he's helping drive the organization forward. Right? And so when you can find those things where it's just so natural for you and so needed elsewhere,
Yeah.
that's where the magic happens.
That's so cool. I mean, I spent 5 years, 6 years maybe with startups that kept failing.
Mhm.
And, but that's where the job market was at the time. And, it made sense, sort of at the time, I thought.
Right.
Um, but I love what you're saying about looking at the middle size market.
The
That's
middle.
interesting. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Well, we could keep talking forever, but is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to think we?
There's one last thing I'd love to leave our listeners with, just in terms of, some mad skills to be able to build some resilience, right? Because I've always had the imposter syndrome. I never belonged at the table. All these things in my mind, as being the only female, the youngest one. I didn't get my degree until I was 40. Like I had all these things that were happening. But here's the secret sauce to being able to do these things. And early in my life, I learned how to fail successfully.
Mm,
And I think so often we have a very binary relationship with success and failure. We think they're opposites. But the reality is you can't succeed without having failed. And so if you're preventing failure, if you're avoiding failure, you're preventing success.
mhm,
And so if you can take on this experimental mindset where it's not pass, fail, right, wrong, good, bad, but it's what does this button do? Let's
mm,
push it. Let's keep the things that worked and get rid of the things that didn't and try again. And if you can get into that mindset in terms of how you navigate your career and your business, then all of a sudden you are able to start to make some bigger plays and show up much more impactfully without having all of the head trauma that goes along with this, right? In terms of the sleepless nights and all the things that happen with that. So I think, in terms of, how do you make this happen and how do you do these things? And we've got to get really comfortable with being, having that experimental mindset and kind of taking a scientific approach to it.
I also like when you talk about failure because one of the exercises I did not too long ago, and I put it on as one of our episodes, was doing a failure resume. And it really does damage to your thought that you needed to be perfect in a job. And that, of course, when you're putting your resume together for a job, you appear to be perfect. That's why the exercise of doing a failure one was so great because I could see how I didn't replicate the same mistake. I learned, made a different one in the new job, but had a different question, and and I guess what I started to see was that failure is just kind of this reiteration of being human.
Mhm.
And if we could like just change the way we look at even the word, it's not even, if you're able to put learning and meaning to it,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
not failure.
I think the reality too is nothing is a complete success or a complete failure ever.
Right, right.
And so we own that narrative.
Yeah.
And so being, for ourselves and for our business and for all of those things. So I think, being really comfortable with that. And I didn't know I was building that resilience. It's one of those hindsight things where it's like, oh, that's how that didn't hurt so much, right? In terms of making all these big changes and taking these big risks. But I do think that fear is probably one of the biggest things that hold people back from having a true fulfillment in their business and their careers. And
Mhm.
when you solve for that, everything just becomes a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's a big one. The fear element is huge. And we spent a lot of time in a lot of our episodes trying to get at fear a little bit, just to break it up so that we can be an observer of it and not have it control us or trigger us or pull us, that
Mm,
we can actually observe it better and
yeah.
see it.
Well, and so often, right, we make things bigger than they are. I'm like, look under that bed. Are they monsters or are they dust bunnies? Like, you just have to look.
Yeah,
Because
that
most of the time it's
definitely.
like, I've been freaked out about this. It's like, why? But yeah, there's a lot to unpack when it comes to fear. That's for sure.
Mm. All right. Well, how can our listeners and viewers get in touch with you and follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love when listeners reach out to me on LinkedIn. So send me a message. Let me know what you thought about the episode, what you agreed with, what you didn't, all that stuff, because I love hearing about your journey. And then, whether your career or your business, needs some help, reach out to us at Career Winner Circle. We've got a
Mhm.
team, of coaches ready to chat and just learn a little bit more about you and see how we might be able to help. And then obviously, if you do not love Mondays, you need to grab that book. And if you head to escapingthecareertrap.com, you'll get a signed hard copy and a bunch of free stuff that no one else gets. So you can go to Amazon and Audible and all that kind of fun stuff. Pop into to our website and we'll take extra special care of you.
Super. So I'd like to ask our guests, what would you tell your 20 something self today, Tammy? What would you tell yourself?
Yep, I think I would tell my 20 something self, I would teach her a very strong lesson in perspective.
Mm.
So many times, especially leading big teams and getting sucked into the corporate drama, everything felt like this episodic adventure where it was life or death. And the reality is, unless you're saving lives or curing cancer, it's probably not. And had I known that and been able to navigate my career with that in mind earlier,
Mm.
would have been had a much more harmonized life in terms of, family life and everything else, but a lot less stress too, right? So I think a heavy dose of perspective is what we all need at early of an age as possible.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and
Thanks for the invite. This has been great.
yeah, and talk this through a little bit. I think you hit on some great aspects of emotions and things that, we're always interested in exploring. So thank you again.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening today, and we sure hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave a comment wherever you listen to your podcasts. Tell a friend about us. Join our public Facebook group, Girl Take the Lead, or visit our website, girltaketheleadpod.com. We also have a YouTube channel where your subscription would be appreciated. Once you're on YouTube, search at Girl Take the Lead. And we've recently expanded to YouTube Music where you can find a video of this episode. And you can also see a video on Spotify. Here are 3 episode takeaways. 1, we can break the career trap cycle by knowing what we want to do, what we love doing, what we want to do next, and why we want to do it. If we find those things that are so natural for us and needed elsewhere, that's where the magic happens. 2, the Gartner research determined that 80% of respondents came back satisfied with their job, and only 20% came back caring about what they do. When you connect your personal ambition to your personal aspiration with the company's goals, individuals are more fulfilled and companies thrive. 3, what if we treated our frenemies as our best customers or negotiate when new work comes along? We could be seen as a stronger leader. And there's some good quotes from the episode. We are the CEO of our own life, and our worth is not tied to our output, and the right path doesn't need to be hard. Our next episode will feature our guest, Judy Bornstein, boomer and founder of C-Suite Resolutions, where she provides mediation, ombudsman services, conflict and negotiation coaching, and corporate training to organizations and executives. She has worked extensively as a CFO and Chief Compliance Officer and brings her business experience to her work in addressing conflict. You are going to love her insights into conflict and what it's all about, and most importantly, how to deal with it. So do not miss this episode. Talk to you soon. Bye.